Githugu, and I am the team leader for the Africa Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility that is located in Nairobi. Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Today we will be discussing a really important topic about taxation and its impact on universal energy access. We will be looking at Kenya as a trailblazer. Just a few words about the Africa Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility. This is a UK government-funded program funded by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and it aims to catalyze a market-based approach for private sector delivery of renewable energy electrification technologies. Our focus is on high-quality standalone solar systems, and we have a great emphasis, and we focus on how these can reach poor households and marginalized groups. It is for this reason that we have done a study on the impact of taxation on the price and the cost and affordability of standalone solar equipment. So why is responsible taxation, why is it called responsible taxation, and why is this important? It's important because we have had long debates for many years now as to whether solar and standalone solar equipment should be exempted from tax or not. So we have done the study, and we have found some interesting recommendations. We've come up with some interesting recommendations that include the fact that having exemptions for standalone solar equipment will contribute as part of the making this equipment affordable. And so I will be the moderator for our discussion today on Kenya. And I will ask our two panelists to please introduce themselves. Let me start with the ladies. So ladies first. So over to you, Mary.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Githinji. I am the country manager for Kenya and Somalia at the Africa Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility. And I have been supporting and leading on behalf of the ACE team, the advocacy for the removal of VAT on solar products. And I've worked in the public policy space for over 10 years. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Mary. Over to you, Patrick.
Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Tonui. I am the head of policy and regional representation with GOGLA. GOGLA is the global organization for the off-grid renewable energy associations, and we seek to engender an enabling environment for our members and for the industry to be able to deliver their products to the communities that we're serving.
Thank you, Patrick. So Patrick, let's just dive straight into it. And we know that Kenya has been recognized as a trailblazer in the off-grid sector. What are the notable milestones in Kenya's off-grid solar journey, and what has mainly contributed to this success?
So I think as we all recognize, when we look in terms of those who've been trailblazers for leveraging and using off-grid solutions for energy access and even delivering on reaching universal access, Kenya has been one of those trailblazers. The government itself, historically, I think this goes back to 2004 when the East Africa community came together as a community, and when they looked at the pillars for realizing their development goals, they said energy access is a key enabler. So Kenya, along with the partner states, it provided for tax exemptions for renewable and off-grid wind energy and similar technologies. And going back then, I think this is part of the historical framework that allowed Kenya to be the industry leader globally today and East Africa. Then fast forward, when you look to when the country decided to establish a universal energy access target. It was one of the very first ones in this region. Initially, it was set for 2020. They actually also one of the first to establish and develop a renewable energy rural electrification plan with specific milestones, saying how they would reach as the grid, how they would reach using mini grids and standalone solutions. They were actually also one of the first movers to adopt national standards and quality standards in initially the Lighting Global, but also the IEC standards. So they've consistently been a trailblazer in looking at the opportunities in this sector and how to actually leverage it to deliver the country's priorities for energy access across the whole country.
Thank you, Patrick. I think that really gives us a great background as to where Kenya finds itself in, even as we talk about some of the specific changes that have happened over time. So the tax policy for the off-grid sector has undergone several changes over the years, but more particularly between 2016 and now. So Mary, talk us through the tax-related changes that we have seen, especially between 2020 and 2021.
So I was saying that in 2020 there was a tax amendment bill that had been prepared, and that tax bill was proposing that there would be a VAT on solar products. And at that time, the industry quickly organized itself and you know, through some actors supporting KEREA, went and engaged with the National Assembly, and those that proposed VAT was actually not enacted or not reinstated. You know, the VAT exemptions had been in place for many years for solar products, so this was really a shock for the industry. But not soon after, with the Finance Act that was actually responding to the COVID pandemic in the country, which had a lot of tax breaks, that Finance Act actually put in VAT on solar products. And not just solar products, but you know, several other renewable energy technologies. It was a lower tax than the usual 16%, but it was still 14% tax for an industry that had been tax exempt for many, many years. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary. So let me come back to you, Patrick. How did introduction of VAT affect the sector, and what happened next?
So, you know, as we look at particularly what happened last year, it's important to understand the broader context of what was going on in 2020. We had gone from a 2019 that was really optimistic. We were looking at in the sector growing, and everybody was looking at 2020 as going to be really one of those years where we would see accelerating growth, greater access and penetration for the sector. And then at the end of 2019, we started to hear about the global pandemic, the COVID pandemic. And right in March 2020 is when we started to see these global shutdowns. And the industry was already seeing, because of what happened in China in December and January 2019, January 2020, there were already concerns about access of products in terms of the availability, because China had shut down in terms of production. And then we were seeing these shutdowns across much of Africa with restrictions on travel. We were seeing a lot of people being forced to stay home for, with in some cases, really strict lockdowns in place. So we as a sector was seeing our customers were now in a situation where they couldn't work, and they were beginning to struggle to pay for their products. We as a sector was struggling to access the products we needed to deliver, and we were working with the governments to see that could we continue supporting our clients, so that because we were initially not designated as an essential service. So it was one of those where we already were seeing a struggle and constraint in the sector with you know, the ability of the customer to be able to earn a living for themselves, pay, provide food, but also make sure that they keep their energy products available and operating was a problem. So when we see this is when now the Kenyan government came in and introduced VAT and these VAT taxes on the sector, which immediately raised the issue of, in this time, is this the right time to be raising prices on your customers and on the industry? And when we knew the people we are serving were already going through this economic stress. So the taxes were, and from our analysis, we can see that companies were either going to be forced to absorb this cost or going to raise their product cost by between 16 and 40%, and we did see this. We saw that at the same time, companies were having to adjust how they had to collect their down payments from their customers because the tax was due upfront, and in many cases, this meant that even though you're trying to provide a finance plan to your customer, every sale was going to force you to dig into your own cash reserves to pay the tax bill for money you are yet to collect over a period of time from your customers. So it made a lot of companies ask the question, could they continue to sustain offering payment plans? The prices on the customers had to go up. And when we look now after the fact what's happened in Kenya, we can see that on the positive, the demand tried to hold, but we saw customers actually make a move towards smaller products, less capable products. So which means maybe not even reaching tier 1, move to lanterns and things like that, because which to us says they really needed these products, but then they had to go with what they could afford. And when we look at the goal to make sure everybody has a product, but also is moving them up the energy access ladder so that they're able to light their homes, but also be able to do something with that energy, be it for education, be it for information, that was quite undermined last year in this space.
Yeah, so a huge impact on energy access overall, especially for the more vulnerable households. So Mary, turning to you, what did it take to successfully advocate for the reinstatement of VAT exemption? Who did you work with? And maybe you can just tell us how it unfolded, sort of, how did it happen?
Okay, so once the VAT was enacted, the Finance Act was enacted, the industry again organized itself through KEREA. There was a coalition, a loose coalition of actors who were all supporting the Kenya Renewable Energy Association to advocate for the removal of VAT at the earliest convenience. And this coalition brought together different actors. It brought together GOGLA, it brought together the Clean Cooking Association, African Mini-Grid Developers Association, ourselves, and other development partners such as SNV and Power Africa and GMG Facility. And these actors together really sat through and thought about what's the best advocacy strategy to actually advocate the reversal of this VAT. And what the strategy was, basically we need to do some research, and that research needs to be sub-sector specific. So the solar sector, for example, needed to come up with an economic impact assessment that would demonstrate what the impact of the VAT was on access to electricity via solar and the growth of the industry. And the same for the clean cooking sector, and the same for the mini-grid subsector as well. And so we went off and undertook this extensive research. And once the research for the 3 sectors was concluded, we then developed policy position papers, or some responses to government really, to address this issue and to make the case to government that actually having this VAT does not benefit Kenya and Kenyans in the long run. That's really the case that we were making, and underserved populations across our country, that they deserved access to electricity, access to clean cooking, at affordable prices, so that they would be able to improve the quality of their lives. And so these policy positions were then used to engage different government and key decision makers. I have to say, we were very fortunate to get the Ministry of Energy to support the studies and to work with us to actually come up with the research, agree on the research findings, and support the entire advocacy engagement. So we worked with the Ministry of Energy, we engaged with National Assembly committees, we engaged with the National Treasury where we could, we engaged with a host of decision makers in their various capacities, to really get them to understand what the problem was and to see it from our perspective. I think, in my view, the National Assembly committees were invaluable in really understanding the issue and helping us advocate and make sure that this didn't go, that the VAT was actually reversed. So yeah, and also a lot of press. We were in the press. We had a lot of positive communication going out, specifically outlining why this sector is so important and how making this change will actually impact on millions of Kenyans across the country. So yeah, primarily that's what we did, and we were fortunate to be successful. Tax advocacy is normally quite difficult, and the Finance Act that was published in July this year was actually did not exempted solar products and a host of other renewable energy products from VAT. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I think this has been a really long journey, and I know, Patrick, you've been part of this journey for most of the time, and you know, we have ups and we have downs. So what were the key challenges that were encountered, and how were they addressed?
We actually saw that in an effort like this, really trying to understand who you need to reach and what was how to engage them in a meaningful conversation that responds to the things that they care about, or the drivers for them, I think was probably the first big area that we needed to. We found that one, we had the support of the national or the line ministry, which is the Ministry of Energy, and I think from you know, what was viewable to us right from the decision to introduce this taxation, they were skeptical about that, and they raised some concerns. But the taxes did come in place. So when we started to engage, we clearly started to see that making the case to the National Treasury and, you know, speaking to them in terms of and demonstrating that social economic impact and the value in terms of this is the right fiscal and economic policy for the country was a place where there was not enough information to be able to speak to them, and which is why I think we needed the fiscal and economic impact analysis that ACE TAF did. That was just the first step. But then the second step, as we interacted with the decision makers, we found that we think we've done enough to communicate the impact and the need and how we contribute. But as we talk to the parliamentarians in the different committees that make decisions in this regard, so the line ministry is responsible for energy and energy access. You know, when we talk to them and some of the questions that they raised, be it around consumer protection, be it around pricing, be it around whether these incentives make a difference for the intended beneficiary. and even the question around Kenya's own status, where they've got excess electricity at some points, but there's this disconnect with, you've got about excess capacity in electricity generation, but you still have an energy access problem, and being able to just demonstrate that there's a role. Then going now to also the line, the ministry that works on the budget and the finance and make decisions on exemptions, again, was around pricing, was also around who we are intended to serve. And because even with solar, you've got solar at the industrial scale, you've got solar that's used in large enterprise, where there are, the issues, and especially when we talk about rural electrification or energy access for the unreached, is a really different context, and really being able to just talk to them and make them understand, going back to their communities and showing that, I think was the second, was another one. And then finally, I think it was also making sure that we as an industry, an energy industry, have a coherent discussion, so that it was not the mini grids are making a case for mini grids that may or may not align to us. On the renewables and energy access is also the clean cooking, being able to understand what are we asking, and then also internally look at what we are asking, and also not be overreaching in that request. And I think that really were the things that we needed to harmonize, so that we were clear on our request. We were also able to engage each of the people or the decision makers in this that would have to have a role in for us to be successful, in ways that speak to what the chair that they sit in.
Thank you, Patrick. I think that's, really comprehensive and will be very useful for others who wish to also engage in a similar process, to understand what are the things that they need to look out for in engaging on this discussion, because it has its sensitivities. We are asking governments to forego certain revenues, and we are trying to, and we are showing them that there's a greater good to be achieved by foregoing those revenues. So very, very important points there. So now that the exemption has been reinstated on VAT, what advice would you give to the sector and government, really? What is our next steps? What do we need to be looking out for? And this question I asked to both you, Patrick and Mary. So maybe Patrick, you go first, and then we hear from Mary.
Thank you. So I think this is a really important question, because even as we sit today and say, is this done deal, and should we not have concerns that we may have to face this same question either in Kenya or in another country in the near future? And I think the reality is, if we are not consistently demonstrating our value and connecting with the decision makers and also with our customers, we are going to have this problem again. So I think first to us as industry is really to make sure that we do a much better concerted effort to make sure that the decision makers are seeing the value. They can, as they go to their communities, as they look how what is the problem and how is it being solved, and are we part of that solution set, is something we need to do a much better job on. That's, I think, going to be one of the first things that we have to do, and we need to make sure we are providing data to the ministry, to the parliamentarians, and even back to the National Treasury, so that when they look and they sit to evaluate, that they have the body of evidence and that demonstrate that this is the right position. Secondly, I think we really need to make sure that we continue that relationship with the line ministry that's working on energy access, that we clearly continue to show that for that, the Kenya's national electrification plan or any other country's plan, that we are helping them we are one of the pillars that's helping to realize that, both in terms of numbers and anything else that's super important. Then I also think that we as an industry continuously also need to make sure we are focused on the end user, that the end user, as they speak to their officials, are speak to, that any, that we continue to make sure that the value that we provide is something that they recognize and they speak up to their elected officials on. So that they don't only hear about solar when they have a gripe, but also when solar is that transformational tool. I think for me, those would probably be the things that I would focus on for now.
Mary, you have some thoughts on this as well? Yeah.
Yes. So I actually agree with a lot of Patrick's points. I think for the industry and for the sector, that this is a first big win, but the sector needs to continue advocating and finding every opportunity to build knowledge and understanding of the sector for decision makers, and continue to say that our goal is that we can reach universal energy access, and it's important for us to do that. I think for government, prioritizing the sector and prioritizing energy access for all Kenyans is really, really important, and particularly trying to figure out how do we address the bottlenecks that we know are there. We know we have concerns about, for example, the quality of products available in the market. How does the government make sure that we have the right standards in place, they're being implemented, and that we reduce as much as possible the importation of any products that do not meet these quality standards? How do we make sure we streamline from the importation all the way to installation of solar products, for example, that they are safe for use for all Kenyans, so that we have energy access, but also optimal use of the devices and the products that are installed, and that we're really benefiting from access to electricity across the country. How do we manage things like e-waste? What do we do about that? This is something that if we ignore will really be a big issue in the future. So I really think the answer is, can we prioritize access to electricity as a country, and do everything in our power to ensure that we do achieve universal access to electricity, that we don't change the taxation framework before we have achieved this, because if we do, then it's it's 2 steps forward and a few steps back. So the government needs to use evidence in making decisions, for example, on reinstating the VAT for Kenya, or on things like import duty for solar products. Let's rely on evidence and what's the impact that such decisions actually make on our major goal, which is access to electricity. Yeah. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you. Yeah, and my final question to you both is sort of, you've both touched on this as you went along in this last conversation. But as a parting shot, what can we do to ring fence the incentive that we have achieved now until energy access targets are achieved? What can we do? Is there anything that we can do to ring fence this win?
So maybe if I can start, what I think as we look at not just Kenya, but also the other countries where we are seeing proactive moves to provide some of these incentives, I think what's clear to me is until a country makes a deliberate decision to deliver universal energy access and actually has somebody responsible and looks at what it'll take to deliver that, then it's going to be a tough road for us. What we found is in every country that has made a deliberate effort to set up a universal energy access goal and actually a plan that develops a roadmap to realization there, to realize that we find that inevitably the cost, the cost or the ability of the consumer to afford the products, to make sure that there's enough products available. How do you open up markets that the private sector will not go because they're just not commercially viable? And that's where these instruments that are both incentivized to incentivize the products are available, and that they are brought there, but also that the customer that we're trying to reach can afford that product. Those are decisions that they will inevitably have to deal with, and therefore this is where the role of these fiscal incentives comes in. And I believe that without, if for in any, a country or a place that's not yet deliberately set its path, itself on that path, and actually does internally, independent, be it in the government, be it with a development partner, or in consultation with the private sector, to actually look at what will it take to reach those and what are the pillars. We as a private sector, for example, this year are recognized through some research with GOGLA that we published earlier this year, is that there are some customers, despite everything we've done to drive down affordability, that just will not be able to afford a quality verified product if it's sold on based on the true commercial cost to manufacture and deliver that product. And we're saying, similar to all other energy products, we do need some type of subsidy to bring down the cost, especially to those who just cannot buy themselves. It could be your orphans, it could be your just poor, because you don't have economic means, and even those people should not be left behind. So for me, I think if the only way we will ring fence this is not just the private sector saying we need support to open up new markets or to make our business models work, because that continues to be one of the things we work on as private sector, but also not just us speaking about the constraints, but also the government and the partners themselves looking at these constraints and saying, how do we deliver this and what role can they bring? I think that to me is probably the biggest thing that needs to happen.
Wow, I agree with Patrick. I think that being deliberate is really, really important. As we're talking about this, you realize the Kenya National Electrification Strategy actually had the target for universal access to electricity for Kenya being 2022. That's a few months away. We have not achieved that target. So my suggestion, and I think it's important that as a sector, we relook at what has actually stifled the achievement of this goal. If you think about it, private sector are able to support government to really achieve their role, which is the public, providing a public good, which is universal access to electricity, can be supported by private sector and is supported by private sector. So how does government work with private sector and really catalyze the growth of the market so that private sector is able to deliver, because private sector can deliver access to electricity faster at a lower cost, and actually reach places that the government might not reach over the next few years, so that we can actually achieve universal access to electricity. So in my mind, ring fencing this is first and foremost outlining what the key constraints that have made the sector not growth, look at how do we address those bottlenecks, but specifically for the finance or the fiscal problems, how do we address this VAT, that it doesn't, it's not reinstated anytime soon until we achieve universal energy access? How do we address import duty, because products are still, the solar products are still being charged about, is it 25% import duty at the moment? How do we address that, not only for Kenya, but at the regional level, because it's an EAC import duty? But also, how do we make sure that we have some sort of checks and balances along the way? How do we chart a path that says, let's do this within the next 3 to 5 years, and these are the markers that we need to have as we go? And can we chart our path and check against those goals that we set for ourselves, so that we don't miss another goal for ourselves? I know we are missing the Kenya target, but I hope we do not miss the universal access goal of 2030, according to the SDG 7.
Thank you, Mary and Patrick. I think this has been a very insightful conversation. Obviously, we can't get into every point of it, but maybe I can try and summarize what we have discussed on today. Then the first key thing is that fiscal incentives, in the broad category of fiscal incentives, which includes tax exemptions and subsidy programs, are a very key factor if we're going to achieve universal energy access in addressing affordability, especially for the more vulnerable and poorer households in the country. And this applies not only in Kenya, but it applies everywhere across the continent, where we have goals and we are yet to achieve those goals. And yet we have here with us a technology that will enable us to reach faster and more affordably than trying to get the grid connected to all the households. We've also talked about the importance of support from the line ministry, and this is very key in terms of just talking about the policy direction and the goals and the targets of the line ministry in putting together what would be a credible way forward and engagement strategy, especially when you're talking about fiscal incentives. In terms of the sort of evidence you need to provide, you need to show that the intended recipients will benefit from these incentives that are being issued. And like I had said earlier, it's important that the government is able to see that they are foregoing a certain revenue and what sort of gain and value they get out of it. We've also talked about the access goals and how we have not yet achieved these access goals that had been set up by different countries. And so therefore, the need to continue with this going forward to make sure that, households and citizens in these countries are able to access, energy. We still have a long way, not too long to, 2030, which is where the SDG goals are. And the progress we're making has been slow, but the use of standalone solar and technologies can help governments to achieve this much, much faster. We've also talked about the need for collaborative effort by actors in the market, in the sector, because without this collaboration, then, we're not able to show the full impact that this has on citizens. And so the need for the collaboration between government, private sector, development agencies, all of this working together towards the goal. And I think the last but not least is that the sector needs to continue engaging with government until really the universal access goals are achieved. And so the sector does not need to be only heard when things are not going their way, but they need to build knowledge with all the players in the sector and all the players, within government and other places, so that, we can achieve universal access goals. So with that, we've come to the end of our podcast. Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you, Patrick, for participating in today's conversation. There's a lot more we could talk about as far as taxation, responsible taxation, and achieving of universal access goals is concerned. So if you need more information on these, please feel free to write to us on ACEKM Help Desk. I'll just spell that out: ACEKM HELPDESK. ACEKM Help Desk at Tetra Tech, TETRATECH.com. So that's ACEKM Help Desk at tetratech.com, or visit our website, www.ace-taf.org. So thank you very much, and we look forward to more conversations on issues that are affecting the sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pauline.
Thank you so much, and goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, and bye.